He waited patiently until my daughter had fallen into a deep sleep. In the stillness of the night, my door slowly creaked open. Every movement he made was deliberate, cautious, as though even the faintest sound could shatter the fragile moment he was creating. He stepped inside, his eyes gleaming in the dim light, carrying a quiet certainty that both intrigued and unsettled me. My husband and I are both 57 years old, and our daughter is 28. My son-in-law, 31, is a remarkable man, charming, kind, and the perfect match for my daughter. From the moment I met him 3 years ago, I felt a strong fondness for him. But over time, that fondness began to transform into something deeper, something I've struggled to suppress. Whenever I'm near him, my heart races uncontrollably, as though it has a mind of its own. I find myself drawn to him in ways I can't explain. My eyes seek him out, lingering on his every movement, captivated by the smallest gestures. I invent excuses to remain in the same space as him, just to steal a few more moments of his presence. It's as if being near him fills a void I didn't even realize existed. Even the sound of his voice over the phone affects me in ways I'm ashamed to admit. It resonates with a warmth and strength that leaves me feeling unsteady, as though his words have the power to unravel me completely. Each conversation, no matter how brief or mundane, feels charged with an energy I can't ignore. I know these feelings are wrong. I know I shouldn't feel this way about him. Yet, the harder I try to push them aside, the more persistent they become, like a fire refusing to be extinguished. I am torn between my sense of duty and these forbidden emotions, trapped in a silent battle that leaves me feeling both exhilarated and deeply ashamed. It's a secret I carry alone, but its weight grows heavier with each passing day. I try to keep my emotions tightly guarded, certain that no one could ever guess what was happening inside me. I had hoped that this infatuation would fade with time, like a fleeting breeze. But everything changed in one unexpected night, the night my son-in-law altered the course of my life forever. So, stay with me until the end, and only judge once you've heard the whole story. Don't forget to like the page and the video to follow me on this journey. It was Christmas dinner, and I had meticulously prepared everything to perfection. Even the red dress with the wide neckline, exposing my shoulders, was a deliberate choice, an unspoken signal. I didn't just want my husband's attention, I also wanted the gaze of another man at the table. Everything seemed to fall into place as the evening unfolded. We gathered around the table, enjoying a delicious meal and unwinding after a busy day. My son-in-law, a charming, charismatic young man with undeniable allure, sat with us. My daughter, radiant and filled with happiness, looked completely content. They exchanged looks, silent glances that spoke volumes, a connection so deep it was almost tangible. It was beautiful to witness their love, so pure and effortless, a perfect couple in every way. In that moment, my heart swelled with peace, a calmness I hadn't felt in a long time. Yet, deep inside, there was a hint of jealousy, seeing how deeply he truly cared for and loved my daughter. After dinner, I casually suggested that he stay the night. It was late, the road to his house was long and dangerous. My daughter smiled and agreed immediately, and he seemed to appreciate the idea. Everything felt perfect, even more than I had imagined. But then, something shifted. A fleeting look of worry passed across my daughter's face, an expression she tried to hide but couldn't. What was on her mind? Could it be something about university? Or maybe trouble with her boyfriend? The thought gnawed at me, and a cold sense of unease crept in. Still, I decided not to push her at that moment. I waited, choosing to hold off until it was just the two of us. As my daughter cleaned up the kitchen, I could feel the tension building in the air. She was clearly upset, trying to mask it behind a calm facade, but I could see the weight of her emotions in every stiff movement, in the way her hands trembled slightly. It was unbearable to watch her struggle like this, and I leaned in, whispering gently, "Are you sure everything's okay, sweetheart?" She paused, her breath a deep, heavy sigh, and her eyes spoke volumes, more than any words ever could. There was unmistakable frustration in her gaze, a flicker of disappointment that stung me like a sharp, quiet wound. She gathered her courage, inhaling sharply, her hesitation palpable as she finally spoke, her voice laced with tension. "He keeps staring at you," she said. At that moment, my heart pounded violently in my chest. I was blindsided. Though I had noticed a few lingering glances throughout the evening, they hadn't seemed particularly unusual, until now. But in the depth of her words, I realized that something far more unsettling had been happening. It wasn't just that he was looking at me as his girlfriend's mother, no, it was much more than that, especially when I turned or bent down. I could feel the shock rise within me, but I desperately tried to keep my composure, trying to soothe her. "Maybe he's just worried," I suggested, the words leaving my mouth as an attempt to calm the air, to deflect the rising tension. But even as I spoke, I knew deep down that the situation was far more complicated than I was letting on. But then, she hit me with a harsh reality. "This isn't the first time this has happened. I see the way he looks at you. His gaze is completely captivated by you." The words struck like lightning, and then came the final, unexpected blow. "Why do you have to wear that red, seductive dress, Mom?" My mind reeled, my breath catching in my throat. I scrambled for an explanation, the words stumbling out in a rush. "It's Christmas, and this dress, it's not that unusual." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, the tension suffocating. The room seemed to shrink as I tried to regain control, silence stretching painfully between us. Finally, I gathered myself, attempting to reassure her. "Don't worry, sweetheart. All men have moments like that. You don't need to make a big deal out of it." But even as the words left my lips, a cold, undeniable truth settled deep within me. This wasn't just her imagination. He had truly been looking at me in a way that went beyond normal. And if I were to be completely honest with myself, a part of me didn't mind that attention at all. I continued to reassure my daughter, urging her to ease her worries, but it only seemed to amplify her jealousy. Once she finished cleaning, she quickly retreated to her room, leaving me standing motionless in the kitchen, consumed by her words. I couldn't shake the vivid memory of how he stared at me, every time I spoke, how his gaze lingered with intensity. Even the night before, when we sat at the table, his eyes were unwavering and powerful, as if he was trying to communicate something that words could never express. He was undeniably a handsome young man, his physique and captivating smile only added to his allure. During dinner, he proved to be an engaging and clever conversationalist, speaking passionately about his projects and future plans, making me laugh with his witty comments. Clearly, he wanted to impress me, and, honestly, he succeeded. In the midst of dinner, I jokingly said that if I were younger, I might feel attracted to him. I said it casually, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just a harmless joke. The way he looked at me was undeniable, and even someone like me, who had long outgrown the fleeting crushes of youth, couldn't ignore it. My daughter laughed, brushing it off as just one of my usual playful remarks, but what she didn't know was that there was something more to the way I observed him, the way I asked about his life and interests, allowing my more lively side to shine through. Even though I knew I shouldn't be nurturing such thoughts, a part of me couldn't help but do so. I knew I was treading dangerously close to forbidden territory. A sense of embarrassment washed over me, knowing that my imagination had run too wild. I couldn't allow myself to think like this. He was my daughter's boyfriend, and they were together, happily so. Yet, deep inside, I felt a stirring in my stomach, a longing, as if a part of me wanted something to happen between us. I forced myself to turn away and walk back to the living room, where my son-in-law and daughter were sitting on the couch, deep in conversation. I paused for a moment, watching them. A wave of jealousy surged through me as I saw them embrace. I couldn't deny it, he had ignited something within me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. A rush of emotions flooded me, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of youth return, a sensation that had eluded me for years. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the night feeling oddly peaceful but tinged with exhaustion. The turmoil of emotions weighed heavily on my mind, and I couldn't shake the remnants of tension left behind. I lay down, trying to escape these feelings and find a moment of calm. Yet, little did I know, something else awaited me. Entering my room, I relaxed, kicked off my shoes, and made my way to the bathroom, deciding to take a soothing shower before bed. I needed this moment of solitude to unwind and process the events of the evening. As the warm water cascaded over my skin, I felt the stresses of the day slowly dissipate. I closed my eyes, letting my mind wander to forbidden thoughts, thoughts I knew I shouldn't entertain. I tried my best to calm the surge of hormones and suppress the desires that stubbornly crept up. But still, something inside me remained restless, an odd feeling of something missing, like a void that only someone or something could fill. It was then that the chill ran down my spine, an unsettling sensation as though I were being watched. I opened my eyes, scanning the steam-filled bathroom, my gaze landing on the fogged-up mirror. It only reflected a vague, indistinct outline of myself, but there was a palpable tension in the air. An invisible presence seemed to lurk in the shadows of the mist. I took a deep breath, shaking my head, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. I must be losing my mind, I thought, attempting to regain my composure. I refocused on the shower, but the chill persisted, crawling over my body, a mix of fear and curiosity that I wasn't sure I was ready to explore. But that feeling wouldn't fade, as though something, or someone, was silently watching me from behind the veil of steam. My heart began to race, but I forced myself to ignore it, focusing on finishing my shower. Wrapping myself in a towel, I stepped out of the bathroom, still filled with unease, before making my way back to the bedroom. The house was cloaked in silence, but an invisible tension clung to the air, setting my nerves on edge. A bold, unsettling thought slipped into my mind: he's still awake, and worse, he might be watching through the keyhole. My entire body shivered at the notion. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the idea as ridiculous, but the strange mix of fear and a certain forbidden thrill made it hard to decipher my true feelings. The thought lingered, teasing me with its audacity. I even caught myself smiling, a mischievous curl of my lips forming as the possibility flickered in my mind: was he really watching me? Or perhaps, by some accident, he had seen something he shouldn't have. I chose not to confront him. The last thing I wanted was to appear paranoid or meddlesome. Still, the suspicion refused to fade, lurking in the back of my mind like an unwelcome guest. Once in my bedroom, I slipped out of the towel and began to dress, forcing myself to push away those intrusive thoughts. It's nothing, I told myself. Just a trick of my imagination, yet, the idea kept circling, gnawing at me. Was he truly watching me, or had it all been a mistake? The uncertainty was maddening, and as I climbed into bed, still wrapped in the lingering heat of the shower, I couldn't quiet the storm raging within. Heart pounding, I closed my eyes, battling against the forbidden ideas threatening to consume me. Logic and reason seemed to abandon me, leaving only a tempest of suppressed emotions in their wake. Exhaustion finally took hold, pulling me into a restless slumber, but the night had more in store. In the midst of a hazy dream, I felt the faintest touch against my arm. At first, I dismissed it as a fragment of the dream, but the sensation was too vivid, too real to ignore. Slowly, reluctantly, I opened my eyes and peered into the shadowed room. What I saw stole the breath from my lungs. Standing at the edge of my bed, with an easy, almost defiant smile, was my son-in-law. My heart thundered in my chest as realization set in. He had entered my room while my daughter slept soundly in the next. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, my voice trembling despite my efforts to steady it. The storm inside me surged once more, a chaotic blend of shock, confusion, and something darker I dared not name. For a moment, he said nothing, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that left me breathless. It wasn't just a look, it was a claim, a silent declaration that sent shivers down my spine. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stepped closer, his movements unhurried, his presence all-encompassing. He leaned in, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that seemed to reverberate through the room. "You know why I'm here." Those words, simple yet charged, echoed through me, breaking through every barrier I'd desperately tried to build. The words that came from him were like sharp daggers, piercing through every layer of composure I had built. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what I had just heard. His gaze locked onto mine, unyielding, as if he were stripping away every secret I had tried to hide. "I know," he began, his voice deliberate and weighted, each word carrying a force that left no room for denial. "I know what you're feeling, and I know what you've been doing to get my attention." It felt as though the ground had been yanked out from under me. A wave of heat surged through my body, followed by a chilling realization that made my hands tremble. My throat tightened, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears, each pulse louder than the last. The air around us seemed to thicken, suffocating, as if every molecule carried the weight of his accusation. "I love her," he continued, his voice dropping an octave, steady yet unrelenting. "I love your daughter. I don't want her to suffer or feel hurt because of anything, especially something like this." His words were like blows, each one striking with precision and intent. I couldn't tear my eyes away from his face, which now bore an intensity that made me feel both exposed and ashamed. My mind raced, grasping at anything to refute him, but there was nothing. Deep down, I knew he wasn't wrong. "Maybe you don't think it's true," he said, taking another step closer. His movements were slow, deliberate, as though he were cornering me, leaving no room for escape. "Maybe you've convinced yourself it's just in your head, that it's innocent. But it's not. Your actions, your looks, they've betrayed you. They've said everything you haven't." I took an involuntary step back, my body trembling under the weight of his words. A lump formed in my throat, and my palms turned cold with sweat. I wanted to deny it, to push back, but every word he spoke hit with undeniable accuracy. My silence was its own confession, a damning testament to everything I couldn't bring myself to say. He moved even closer now, his presence overwhelming, his gaze unrelenting. "I don't want her to find out," he said, his voice quieter but no less intense. "I don't want her to be hurt. But you need to understand. I'm not blind. I've seen it all." My breath caught as shame surged through me, hot and suffocating, wrapping around me like a vice. I felt exposed, as though every thought I had tried to bury was now laid bare before him. I wanted to say something, anything, to reclaim a shred of dignity, but his words had shattered every defense I had. The silence between us was deafening, stretching endlessly as his gaze bore into mine. I felt as though I were being crushed under the weight of his scrutiny, his judgment. My chest tightened, and a sense of dread took hold of me, rooted deep in my core. Unable to withstand the tension any longer, I turned away, my legs barely able to support me as I staggered a step back. Shame and guilt clawed at me, relentless and consuming. I knew there was no coming back from this moment. The truth I had tried to suppress was now a glaring reality, and there was nowhere left for me to hide. He left shortly after, closing the door with a firm, resolute sound that echoed through the stillness of the room. I stood there, motionless, caught in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't fully process. Even with the heater running, a chilling cold seeped into my very core, as though it originated from the storm of guilt brewing within me. The weight of my own actions bore down heavily, suffocating me with regret and shame. I couldn't believe I had let myself drift so far into forbidden thoughts, had let emotions I barely understood take root. How had I let things reach this point? He was my daughter's fiancé, for heaven's sake. The realization hit me like a wave, leaving me gasping for clarity and clinging to the shreds of morality I still held. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the darkness wrapped itself around me like a suffocating shroud. Sleep felt like an impossibility. Every time I closed my eyes, his words reverberated in my mind. You may not realize it, but your actions and your gaze, they've given you away. Each syllable was a dagger, piercing through my defenses, forcing me to confront truths I'd tried to bury. I thought of my husband, steadfast, loyal, and unwavering in his love for me. He had been my rock for years, the one constant in my life who had never faltered. How could I betray him, even in thought? How could I let fleeting moments of curiosity and temptation endanger everything we'd built together? He deserved better than this. He deserved a wife who cherished him as much as he cherished her. And then there was my daughter. My beautiful, bright daughter, who had trusted me with her dreams and shared her happiness with me. How could I ever look her in the eye if she knew the truth? The thought of her heartbreak, her disappointment, was unbearable. It wasn't just her relationship at stake, it was her faith in me, her mother. What kind of person had I become to let this happen? The guilt churned within me, a relentless tide that refused to subside. When dawn broke, I climbed out of bed, my body heavy with exhaustion but my mind too restless to remain still. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window, staring blankly at the world outside. The steam from the cup rose like a silent specter, but it did little to warm the icy knot in my chest. The sound of footsteps broke my reverie. My daughter and her fiancé entered the kitchen, their smiles bright and unassuming. He greeted me with the same casual warmth he always had, as if nothing had happened. I watched them interact, her laughter, his easy charm, and felt a pang of guilt so sharp it nearly took my breath away. Yet, there was also a strange relief in his demeanor, as if his unspoken understanding allowed us to move forward without further consequence. I forced myself to smile, to engage in small talk, though inside, I was a storm of conflicting emotions. As they left the kitchen, I remained behind, clutching my now cold tea, staring at the empty space they'd left behind. In that moment, I made a decision. This family, this life, these were the things that truly mattered. My husband's love, my daughter's trust, the stability we'd all worked so hard to maintain, these were treasures I couldn't afford to jeopardize. Whatever fleeting emotions had surfaced the night before, they were nothing more than shadows, dangerous illusions that I had to bury deep within me. I exhaled shakily, the breath carrying a silent vow: I will never let myself stray again. No matter the temptation, no matter the fleeting whispers of what could never be, I would protect this family with every fiber of my being. For them, for myself, for everything we had built together. And as I stood there, the first rays of morning light filtering through the window, I felt the icy grip of guilt begin to thaw, replaced by a fragile but resolute sense of purpose. Mistakes were inevitable, but redemption was always within reach, if only one had the courage to choose it.